What's up, y'all? Welcome back to our continuing series that connects masculinity in the Nativity.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Love it. That's just Jeff came up with that, and it's really good. It'll be our next series coming out in 2025, December. But welcome back to the Patros Podcast, as we are embracing healthy masculinity, and we're just, tis the seasoning out here. Because I'm Buddy the Elf.
Buddy the Elf.
And what?
AKA.
Are you Buddy the Elf?
No. Who am I? I mean, I like Buddy the Elf. You know what? One of my favorite Christmas movies is
Crazy Nights.
Not that one. Is Rudolph. Just like where the guy's a dentist. You know what I'm talking about? Like the cartoon. You don't freaking know this one?
I mean, maybe I've seen it.
Oh my gosh.
But I do have a funny thing about Rudolph. We have the blow up Rudolph in the living room. And so last year when the kids were 2, they'd come out of the bedroom, like we'd get them ready for school. And as they walk out, I'd have him blown up. But if they touched him, I had a remote that was tied to like the thing. And if they would just touch him, I'd kill him. He'd literally deflate, and they'd cry and like scream. They'd be like, "No, Rudy!"
So that's when you're like, "Stop killing him."
Yeah, I literally was like,
so they learn not to touch him.
Well, then what I taught them was, if you want to revive him, you have to blow kisses. So they would accidentally touch him sometimes, and they'd be like, and then I'd kill him, and then they go, oh, and they'd throw a bunch of kisses, and then I'd be like, keep going, and then I'd turn it on again, and then he'd revive. They'd be like, yeah.
How is that any better than telling your kid that Santa exists?
Because they're 2. And I wasn't lying. He was getting killed for them touching him. I was just in control.
Oh man.
But so what's that movie?
No, it's just it's Rudolph, and he is rejected by his family because he's got the big, red nose.
Yeah.
And so he goes off and he goes to the North.
Surgeon.
He goes to the North Pole, and he finds this dentist, this little kid who wants to be a dentist. So he's rejected by his parents. Rudolph is rejected by his parents, and so they are a couple of misfits, and they find this place where all of the reject toys go, and it's called the Island of Misfit Toys. And it's like they're rejects too, so they're like, oh, we fit right in.
And they're just a bunch of hippies.
It's like, I don't know, I say that phrase a lot, like, oh, it's like the Island of Misfit Toys. Like, meaning things don't, like, fit here.
Where the least of these go.
Yeah, we're just all, like, kind of rejects. I used to say it about my old small group, not like we were all rejects. We were not connected by anything other than Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Like, there weren't natural affinities that connected us.
Which is what Jesus wants.
It was just like, oh, Jesus connects us.
That's good.
So I would refer to us as the Island of Misfit Toys. Not because we were misfits, but we just didn't.
Well, technically you are.
We are misfits,
Yeah.
It was more theologically accurate.
Yeah.
But listen, we talked about, on the last episode, just it's Christmas. So it's Christmas time. And, we wanted to discover and look at the Nativity story and what kind of masculine traits can we find there. So masculinity in the Nativity. And so we primarily looked at Joseph last time, but also we talked about last time that you have a song that you recorded. What y'all don't know is that we are in the midst of greatness here on the Patros Podcast. It is not me.
It's the red hat make America
Allan
great again.
is. I had to get the hat on. I got green.
Yeah,
I needed some red.
It's the Christmas vibes.
But you actually are an artist, and you've recorded, like, how much music have you recorded?
I've recorded a lot, but I'm one of those people that doesn't, unless I really want to, I'm not putting it out.
Oh, unless we force you, like, now to play it. But he recorded a Christmas song several years ago, and so anyway, we've got. Can we put the lyrics up while?
Yeah, I can.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I can.
So that way they can kind of follow along. But first of all, I just thought it would be great to hear something from you and let the people hear. But also, it is the Nativity story in like a way you have not heard it before. So let's take a listen.
All right. And shout out to my friend Michaela Pena, because she's also a Brazilian sister. She's the one singing the song.
I've been wondering a while, who is this child that they surround? Some people smile while others frown. I've heard a lot of wild ancient scripture files that claim he is the crown that created every ounce, turn vibrations into sounds. Hesitation with denial, cause this is so profound. God Almighty measured by the pound. I'm down to stick around. I'll ask my questions loud. My knees gon' hit the ground and I'ma say, what child is this? Who laid to rest? This is Christ the King, whom shepherds watch and angels sing. Yeah. Oh my, did a ruler put a hit on a helpless little baby that don't even got a crib or a bib on? Out of fear that he might lose career when he got word that the Son of God appeared, claimed that he revered with a fake smile like veneers. Fast forward, he survived his peers, and he's in a synagogue without sin in his soul. All alone, 12 years old, with the teachers and scrolls. And as the story goes, the story unfolds. This child inside a manger delivered our only hope. Gonna heal, gonna sacrifice his own flesh. Resurrect to show us in him there is no death. Rewind back to the beginning. God made man, man started sinning. God became man, lived sinless. Man killed God, God killed death. It is finished, and cause of that same story, we're forgiven. What child is this? Who laid to rest? This is Christ the King, whom shepherds watch and angels sing.
Man, that is so good. That is so good. We got to get that out. People, share this. Where can they find that? Can they find you on Spotify? Like, what's the best way for people to find you?
I gotta change some things.
Oh, he's like, I ain't gonna.
Yeah. I gotta change some things. I had like I didn't know what to put for my artist name, so people called me AP all the time. So I had AP the artist, and then I did like a rap competition and like did really well, and then they were like, you gotta change your name, dude.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're like, that name sucks.
Really?
And I was like, Noted.
What
do I do? And they're like, I don't know, but it's not that.
No. Call yourself Jay-Z. Call yourself JB.
Otabe.
Well, you should call yourself, what was the one from the Noche Buena? Was that?
What? Oh, like that's the name?
Yeah, that's your name. Noche Buena.
A good night?
It would be a weird vibe.
That's hilarious.
Oh, man, that's so good. But, like, I wanted to dial into thank you for sharing that.
For sure.
But it's a really good segue into, as we look at the nativity scene, because Herod is going to come onto the scene. Mm-hmm. And you wrote, oh, my, did a ruler really put a hit on a helpless little baby that ain't even got a crib or a bib on, out of fear that he might lose his career when got word that the Son of God appeared. And, of course, Jesus does survive that. But, like, those lyrics need to be explained from the story. So why don't we, if you got your Bibles, we're going to read in the nativity story in Matthew chapter 2. And we're going to see what other let's dive in a little bit to this character that those lyrics kind of refer to.
All right, 2:1. Mm-hmm. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.
All right, I'm going to stop it there.
Yep.
You got several people here, right? We're introduced in the story. We heard last time about Joseph and his response to the pregnancy of his wife, to whom there had been no consummation of the marriage, and just what a godly response that was. And then the story goes to after Jesus being born in Bethlehem in Judea. So we kind of have skipped the actual night of the birth. And maybe that's something that we can swing back to in a second.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at the characters in the story, the two main characters are Joseph and Herod. Like that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
In terms of, and especially as men, as we're trying to look at what does masculinity look like.
The protector and the oppressor.
Yes, you have the juxtaposition. So I think it's easy for us to kind of look at that and camp on it. But we're introduced to Herod. Then there's the Magi, which are also a really interesting piece of the story. The Magi were, I'll tell you, like exactly what they kind of represent. But Magi is it's actually a Greek term, and it would refer to a kind of subclass of Persian priests. Is what the Magi were. They have been come to be known as wise men, and I would argue that they are completely wise men. But their orientation in that time would have been much more associated with like science, like people that were studying the stars. They were scientists, right? Like you had astronomers and astrologers, but you had them looking at the stars and reading. Clearly these are wise men, but a lot of their, throughout history kind of like growth is more of imagination than it is. So Christianity does get in trouble sometimes when we are imagining. So like there's now like we have names for these guys now. We got their
like really convenient things of like, his name was
correct,
Joshua
like,
too.
When they died, and that these things you don't see them till like 8th, 9th century stuff. There's art depicted about the Magi. Like when you in some cases the Magi I feel like are even more venerated than the Christ. Like the one whom they came to venerate. So like you have to be careful with that, but I do think they're an interesting part of the story because you want to talk about dudes who would like healthy masculinity. What is more healthy than wanting to see the long prophesied and foretold Messiah, King of the universe, King of the world, King of the Jews, be born? Like, meet him.
Yeah.
You're talking about something that for 1,000 years they were looking forward to. That in the Old Testament they're talking about, and so you're thinking, well, how did the Persians?
I was about to ask. So them as Persians, they wouldn't have read or they didn't traditionally understand the Jewish literature about Jesus the way that the Jews understood it.
Yeah, but they would have. They
probably had read it.
Yeah, because when the deportation happened, right? So you've got Babylon, and then you've got Persia that come and conquer Israel. And so once the fall of Jerusalem happens, Persia had already come. Then Babylon comes and defeats Persia. But the point is they had all been deported. And then Babylon falls to Persia again. And so if you remember, Artaxerxes lets Nehemiah go back and build the wall. So they're in Persia at that time. There's a Persian king. Now they've been deported to Babylon, but there was a Persian king that had deposed of the Babylonian king. And so now Persia is the one calling the shots, and ultimately they let them go back and build a wall. Well, that was 430 something, I think, BC. So you've got a 400-year period of silence in the Old Testament before Jesus comes on.
Yeah.
So that's generation upon generation who now were living with these Jews, who we know did not lose their culture because they still have it today. They're the only ones who, when dispersed all over the world, were somehow able to keep their culture.
That's crazy.
Which to me is another reason
crazy
to look at it and go, gosh, maybe there's something to this whole Bible thing.
Yeah.
Because you have the Jews, they kept their scriptures, they kept their culture, they're Jewish. Like, they're Jewish. And so over that time, those wise men would have certainly intermingled with the priests and the scribes and would have got their hands on the Tanakh, like the copies of the Old Testament, and would have been reading those. And so there is they are, the reason they're searching after the star is Numbers 24:17. Numbers 24:17, which says, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. Well, what's a star? A scepter is like, that's a king. Right? Kings had scepters, right? So a king will rise out of Israel. A star will come out of Jacob, all right? Well, Jacob is Israel. Like, I'm getting that this is Palestine. I've heard of this. Like, right? Like, they live over there. We deposed to them. He will crush the foreheads of Moab, the skulls of the people of Sheth. So again, like, there would be a general area that was being foretold here. Yeah. And then what's really interesting is that there'll be people that disagree with this, but in Daniel, I think Daniel also talks about this in his 70 weeks. So when you look about the timing of Messiah's birth, in Daniel 9:24-26, it says this, that 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city. So if you take the timing of 70 weeks, or upon the holy city, that what he's saying is in 70 weeks, Jerusalem is going to, there's going to be something happen in the holy city, is what he's saying. And he goes, so we need that amount of time. So we need 70 weeks for, and then he goes on, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Well, a lot of people think that that's like end times. Yeah. But man, it sure sounds like the birth of Jesus to me. Yeah. Like, Jesus came on to sin to wash away people's sins. Right?
So that's 483 years after the decree to rebuild Jerusalem.
Yeah, so it's there.
Messiah's birth.
Yeah, there's the point is, like, that timing. It was like 483 years. There's some little discretions, but like they would have been able to take that 70 weeks and go, well, when did they start to rebuild the wall under Artaxerxes? And that was in 445 BC. Now you fast forward that. Yeah. Those 483 years, or whatever it is, then go, well, we've got to take away the years that, like that's when the Messiah will be slain, right? So when he puts an end to it, it's not his birth, it's his death. So we got to take away 30 years, or what?
36, 35, yeah. Whatever.
Correct.
Yeah.
They would have been, which is why the Magi were never right smack dab on the date of his birth. They probably didn't see Jesus until he was a toddler.
Yeah, it was
so
like
they
2
could
years
have been
old
off by a couple of years here or there. But the point is, if they took all that literally and were doing the math, they could have predicted a really close time.
That's crazy.
Of when the Messiah was going to come. And I don't think the Jewish people were not looking at it like that. So when you talk about Magi being,
wise men,
they were wise men. And that's why I think the Spirit of the Lord was upon them. Like Bible doesn't say this, so I'm not trying to be extra biblical. Not a heretic here.
I was about to say.
But just like God revealed this to them in a way, because you want to say, well, how could other people not see it then? Yeah. Sometimes God
uses vessels for his glory.
It doesn't do everything for everybody.
There's common grace, and there's times that God will use you as a tool for the greater story.
Yeah. So when you look at the Magi, I think the fact that they were willing to travel all of those, over 1,000 miles just to get a glimpse of the King. And so again, relating it to healthy masculinity in our lives, what are we willing to do so that we can get a glimpse of the King?
That's good.
And I don't think that we are willing to do what they did.
And they're not even technically, from what we know, believers.
They weren't even like, these are Persian astronomers.
Yeah. Which is there any scripture or any ideas in historicity, like, of whether or not they might have converted because, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're believing the actual context of the text more than even Jews are.
Yeah, they're definitely, in my opinion, they're
interpreting the text more accurately,
quote unquote, saved. Like, like we're gonna see the wise men in heaven.
You think
like
so?
They're right. I believe they're rightly related to God. You don't come and worship the king.
They showed up and worship Jesus as a toddler.
That's what I'm saying. You're worshiping a baby.
Yeah.
A toddler. But like, don't tell me that you don't get it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you understand, but if you're looking at the scriptures that much and that intently, and God has revealed
found them
this
in history.
They found them in history. Come on.
Like, these are the guys you want gambling for you.
Hey, Magi won. What you bet? You like the spread there?
44 black. But, like, the other question I guess I had is, because you know some of this, like, Old Testament stuff, and I know that there's a lot of, like, number
There's
stuff
a lot
too.
of numerology.
So it's like 69 times 7 is the 483.
Yeah.
What is that significance? Do you know?
I'm sure there's significance.
Okay.
I don't know. We need somebody who's a
numerical,
numerologist.
like, language, right?
Everything was numbers. 7 means something. 6 means something. 5 means something. 11 means something. Like,
and then the words mean something too, because the words have certain amounts of letters in them. That amount to that same.
And it's not wild. There's a podcast. Oh, man.
It's impressive.
Oh gosh, I can't remember the podcast. I'll have to, if we had show notes, I'd put it in the show notes.
We could just send it to me when you find it.
Okay,
yeah.
Anyway, where they go over a lot of this kind of thinking, and we don't in the West and in our culture, we don't. It's like, oh, lucky number 7. And we just kind of make light of it. Now, some people are really like, no, 7 is lucky number 7. But even in our culture, we can still relate to this, right? Like, when you think of the number 7, you do think of what? Perfection.
I don't know
holiness.
why 7's always been my favorite number.
Yeah.
But I never was Jewish or anything like that.
Yeah, but I mean, God rested on the 7th day, so.
Also, there's like times. Yeah, there's things within our society that point
and
to 7.
within a Christian's, like, right?
Yeah.
The number 3, like.
Not 13.
Not 13. We don't put that in a hotel either. But like, Jesus was born on the 3rd day, right? 3 days, I'm sorry, on the 3rd day he rose again.
Yeah.
Jonah was, in the belly of the whale 3 days. Like, there's other references in the scriptures to 3 being like an important number. 666, right? Like, that's the, 1 less than perfection was Satan. The fall represents evil that, that's against God. So there are, we know some of those numbers. So imagine taking that to like the
nth degree.
Right. Like, you're just going all out with numbers. And they're all like legitimate.
That's crazy.
Right? Which is kind of fun. I could see myself when I get like really old and I got nothing better to do.
For your hobby.
Bro, let's look at some numbers. What do they mean? It's like the double rainbow. What does it mean?
So then, all right, tying it to masculinity.
I mean, with the Magi, I think for me, it's just, what are we willing to do, right? Are we willing to seek? So the Magi were.
That's grit and humility.
And they were in their own culture, but they embraced a different culture.
Yeah.
So think about that politically, people. You're in your own culture, but they embraced another culture. Man, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there. Like, we're America. I love America. Yeah. We speak English here. Awesome. I'm totally down. I don't want to go anywhere else. Love this country. Is it so bad that there is a Spanish and an English option? Like, when you call in, like, is it so bad?
Do
like,
people get mad about that?
People get mad about that stuff.
No way.
Yes.
They're not saying it to me, but maybe just because I have a Spanish accent.
People get mad at that.
You got some racist friends, Jeff.
It is true, though.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Because
people legit get mad about that.
You lived in the South your whole life. Like, you grew up in a city where you basically had to speak it to get around.
Yeah. Well, actually, like, I know people Like, I know somebody where his wife moved out of Miami because she got harassed for not speaking Spanish, which
Right.
I think is wrong too.
Which is also, that's doubly wrong.
Yeah.
But like people say, hey, it's America, speak English. Or people are like, hey, it's America,
Yeah.
speak American.
Yeah. And it's
No,
like,
it's English.
we actually don't have a formal language.
But like that.
Is this you committing to learning Spanish next year?
Oh man.
Are we doing this on the podcast?
I really.
We're going to get updates?
That is one of the things I'm considering. I am considering it. I don't know if I want to go down that path.
But yeah, there is something to, like, yes, you can be proud of your people, your nation, your whatever, like, you know, like your tribe. But then there's something to understanding that, like, it's not that we're better, you're worse, or anything like that. You can just be proud of it, but you can see the same amount of value in another family,
who also would have pride in where they're from.
Yeah,
and
to enjoy and celebrate those things.
And I just want to say, like, if someone else went somewhere else, would they really assimilate entirely to the culture, or would try to maintain some of their own, identity and heritage?
Yeah.
Everyone would do that.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's that big a deal. To me, it's like, why not celebrate our differences? Because, man, you speak a different language. You do different food. You have different customs. Like I was talking with the guy the other day, pastor, who was telling me, like, we're talking about fatherlessness and everything. He's like, we don't have language in our culture for this, where you're talking about caring for other kids. So in Spanish culture, right, Latin culture, we take care of our own, right? Like that's what we do. Like, and even men, it's
they don't have like a foster care system in the DR.
Right. Like we've got 6 kids. I'm gonna take care of all those 6 kids. Like we take care of our own. But to take care of somebody else's kid, like he was saying, men can be ridiculed for that. There's not a concept
because you're
for
overstepping.
it. You're overstepping. That's not yours.
Like, hey, and
not
it's
your
like,
job.
but you're not taking care of him.
And you're like, but you're not.
Yeah.
So
like you'll take care of your nieces and nephews maybe, but like a stranger's kid.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I just thought that was I was like, wow. See, and so I learned something. If I hadn't had a conversation with a Spanish speaking guy about that in his broken English, by the way, like it wasn't like he had perfect English. But that's interesting. So instead of, it's not that big of a deal. But that just dawned on me that these Persians had a subculture in their culture who I'm sure they were trying to impact and influence, and yet found interest in another culture. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right? But then to be willing to go and look for.
And submit to it.
I
think that's a big thing.
So to me, what are we talking about here in terms of masculinity? I think masculine men are men who are lifelong learners. We should not be stuck in our ways.
Yeah.
That's not to say we don't have conviction. So don't mistake the two. But conviction, you can have conviction and still be willing to change your mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when I see a culture that doesn't do that very well. So, and as men, we don't do that very well. We get stuck in our ways. So to see the Magi do that, to see them humble themselves, I think you said that.
Yeah.
Right? Humility.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the, we've talked about this before, like the idea of there are things that God designs in us, both male and female, that are God-glorifying things. And the perversion of those things is when it becomes sin.
Yeah.
So like for men, like being self-assured, that's a beautiful thing when it's used to not succumb to peer pressure,
Right.
like stuff like that. But when it becomes ego to now where you're stubborn because you have to be self-assured because of pride, then there's a problem.
Right.
And so I think that to that point is, as men, for us to be able to say, look, I am firm in my foundation of Jesus, but I am flexible where Jesus calls me to be flexible.
Yeah.
And so with the Magi saying like, hey, we're flexible when it comes to the truth of like, we read the scriptures, they say that we're going to find this thing, it's there, he's there, let's go worship him. Because that prophecy just became true.
Yeah, I just think that's...
They're seeking truth.
They're seeking truth no matter where it leads. And we can't be afraid to seek truth. Because I do have friends that will not even listen to the other side on anything. Whether it's... now I'm not saying like put yourself in a position where like if you know you're weak mentally or you're weak spiritually, I'm not saying put yourself in that position, but if the God we call on as God is so amazing and so wonderful, don't you think he can defend himself? Like, you know what I mean? Like don't you think that like so I don't think he needs me to like. So why can't I just present the truth?
That's
Not like,
good.
hey, here's what I think. Here's what I believe.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
But we don't spend enough time, and myself included, around unlike-minded people. There is value in like how does the gospel go forth if all I do is hang out with a bunch of Christians? So who are we hanging out with? And I look at the Magi as just a really good example of being willing to enter into other cultures, other situations that made themselves uncomfortable. They took on a long journey but they risked.
They're
right?
adventurous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like, think about the risk that you're taking. There's no guarantee you're going to see these people. I don't know how they are financed.
And this isn't passed down to you from your lineage and your culture.
They're like,
This is foreign to you.
Yeah, what are you doing here?
Wow.
This is like, this is very much like a pioneering kind of spirit.
Trailblazing, pioneering, yeah.
But I think there's something that's masculine about risk. Now,
and it's not risk to even overcome, because you have the, that, like, where it's like to conquer, adventure to conquer. It's adventure to submit.
Right. Yeah. And it's calculated risk.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm not saying that you just risk it all for the sake of the thrill of the risk, but
they've read the scriptures and been like,
they had enough evidence.
And I wonder if as they found evidence in the scriptures, that they looked at their own literature and their own heritage and saw all the discrepancies and started logically thinking through stuff and being like, wait a second,
this isn't adding
our
up.
stuff doesn't make sense.
This doesn't make sense. This over here,
I can't find any conflicts here.
That's cool to think about what they discovered in their own.
Yeah. As they were reading.
Yeah. So, and then, like, I think the last thing, which we didn't read, but the gifts that they brought, they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I think it was in verse 11.
Yeah.
And think about those gifts. Gold, what does that signify? That's like wealth, power, right?
Stability, life savings. I mean, there's
frankincense is just perfume, and then myrrh is most likely like a painkiller. In Mark 15:23, they asked Jesus if he wanted like some.
Is it like vinegar?
Yeah, myrrh and wine. So like some kind of fermented, but probably something to help dull pain.
Like a medicine.
Yeah, some kind of medicine. So that one seems maybe a little out of sorts compared to like the other two. But if you think foreshadowing, what will Jesus need one day?
Wow.
He's going to need this myrrh one day to dull the pain of a humanity that didn't love him back. That's pretty wild.
That's actually because the story of the Nativity is like it's cute when we discuss it, but it's really the beginning of something so tragic.
Yeah. Like,
it's God stepping into tragedy.
Yeah.
It's God, stripping himself.
Yeah.
For those of us that exist in this tragedy that is the human experience because of sin.
Yeah, that's right.
And the fact that, like, we experience not only loss of life, but we experience loss of friendships, loss of, there's so much loss and destruction that we're experiencing all the time. And Jesus, it's beautiful that he steps into it, but it's tragic that he needs to.
Yeah, that's a good word. That he unfortunately has to, because we made such a mess of it.
Yeah.
So I think the Magi teach us I don't know. I said I was going to talk about Herod, and then I got on the Magi. Sorry about that.
But it's just, there's so much richness. Like, once you start talking about this, it's hard not to get lost in like everything. Like, there's so much to all of this. Wait, so go back to Herod then. So
Herod, we know we read about Herod, and then he, they find out where the baby's going to be born. How do they find out? They go to the scriptures. Again, prophecy. Like, all of this is written down.
Yeah, it's like, dude, there's literally a manual for this.
There's a manual for it. So, and what's funny is they asked Herod where, like, we know there's a king, the scepter. He's of the Jewish people. We know there's a king we want to worship. We don't know where he's at. So, like, it tells me they didn't have the Micah scroll. that said, it's in you, Bethlehem, of Ephrathah. Like, they didn't have that. So they had to ask. And so Herod didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? So he has to go to his chief priests and stuff and go where? And they know exactly. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, out of you will come people to shepherd my people Israel, or someone to shepherd my people Israel. So they knew where the Messiah was going to come from. And so Herod then says to them, go find him, tell me where he's at.
So I can worship him.
I want to worship him too. So I did a little research on Herod.
Yeah.
That would have been actually something that I could have seen him saying 100% was consistent with his character, because Herod, whatever you think of a political like operative who just like is always making like, I don't care who's in power, I'm going to be there. I'm making friends with everybody. That was Herod.
Okay.
So Herod, he's Herod the Great in history.
Yeah. His
dad was friends with Pompey. So like, this is wild. His dad, Herod the Great's dad, Antipater maybe? Anyway, something. I'll find it. He was an Edomite. So he was an Arab Edomite who was a great businessman, and through trade and everything else made himself wealthy. And so he wasn't even a Jew. And he ultimately converted to Judaism. Antipater, that's what it was. So here you have an Arab who presumably was a Muslim.
Wow.
Converted to Judaism.
Wait, he wouldn't have been a Muslim yet.
Oh, you're right. He would have been Muslim yet.
Isn't that like 500 years after Jesus?
I got my timelines mixed up in my head for
a second.
So he would have had his Edomite religion. Whatever religion is that he practiced.
Yeah, like a pagan god. Yeah,
well, he would have. I mean, it would have been a
Arab
Semitic kind of religion.
Okay,
would have been a Semitic religion. But anyway, he was not Jewish. Converts to
not
Judaism.
Muslim either.
Not Muslim either. Converts to Judaism. Then becomes Pompey conquers the land, Palestine. He becomes friendly with the conqueror. And the conqueror's like, oh, you should really be my vassal here. So that's how he comes to power.
Oh,
so he's the kind of guy who was like. So what I'm saying is he had Arab friends, winning others over. He had Arab friends, he had Jewish friends. Now he had Roman friends, and then his son. So then this is Herod the Great's dad. So he introduces him to Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and all these people that we heard about in history that no one actually remembers what they did, but they know there's a story there.
Yeah.
And that's during the fall of the Republic, in which they then become an empire, and Caesar Augustus becomes the first one. So he kind of he is always in kind of that privileged kind of situation. And because his dad's friend was friends with Pompey, he was granted Roman citizenship. So Arab background, converts to a Jewish religion, got Roman citizenship.
So he's just
he's got friends everywhere.
Of power.
He's a cocktail of power. That's a good way to put it.
Wow.
I like that. So then he becomes essentially through, he was this, and then a tetrarch, and then a king of Judea. So he is over the whole thing. But when I think about him, I think about somebody who rose from kind of a background of not being important to being important. So we would call it a self-made man, which we really know is not the case. But anyway, self-made man. And here he is ruling the whole thing. But the Jews hate him because he's not Jewish enough. And you know what I mean? The Romans just tolerate him because he's really not one of them.
Yeah, you're not actually one of us type of thing.
Right.
Okay.
Even though you're cozying up to us and everything. So he he like pours himself into building projects, because I think I'm just reading between the lines.
Kind of like to establish, like, I am that guy.
I am that guy.
Because that's how you did that. You build statues, you build monuments, you build.
So all of these like really amazing, first century, like around that first century time period, like our architect was built by Herod. He did a lot of those things. That building project we talked about, like he probably did that. But as he gets older, he gets insane, and he gets jealous. And so he had divorced his first wife, really, and he married a second gal who was like she was a Jew. So that was like to kind of appease the Jewish, because he was trying to make friends. Yeah. But he ended up really loving her. But then the older he got, he got really jealous, and he started losing his mental faculties, and he was paranoid. And I'm just thinking, like, so as we're talking about healthy masculinity, how many people do you know that took this path, where they started from nothing, they kind of grew up in the ranks, they got their position, a seat at the table, and instead of remembering where they came from, they just like turned.
Lost it.
Right?
I don't know a lot of people that made it, but I know a lot of people that came from nothing or still, but like, there's this season, like you meet them or get to know them when they're in the dumps, and you see the real them when they're in the dumps. Yeah. And then the second there's like a feeling of like, okay, I'm all right now. Yeah. You see a whole different version of them. I've seen that. Like, I see that all the time.
Where they just change.
Yeah. Where it's like, I'm now self-sustained. But when they're in the dumps, it's like, I need Jesus. I need to get my life right. I need to stop doing all this garbage, blah, blah, blah. And then the second everything's okay, I forget where I came from.
Yeah, back to normal. Yeah. Which normal was not really good.
Well, we keep going back to the dumps. Yeah.
So anyway, that's Herod the man. And he ends up, we know him in Scripture because of what happens after the birth of Jesus. In which he slaughters everyone who is under 2 years old.
Which is, I mean, can you imagine?
Right.
Because that means soldiers were out here not, like, I mean, we don't know. But to slaughter 2 years old and younger is insane.
So there were orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years or younger. In accordance with the Magi timeline, and this fulfilled the prophet Jeremiah. So again, you have Matthew, who's a Jew, talking to Jews, going, I'm trying to prove to you why all of this is true. We have the Scriptures. So I've already told you about the star. I already told you about... Yeah. Right? So now I'm telling you about...
Which, isn't there like a debate over whether or not the 2-year-old slaughter thing was real? I mean, there's debate, but I believe it. But
there's debate. Every single piece of the Christmas story has been attacked. Of course,
if it's in the Bible, they're attacking it.
Well, and because they I think a lot of it is they don't have they don't feel like they have extra biblical evidence, references to these things, but we always do. We always find it always surfaces. It'll show it's just been buried. They'll find it. Archaeologists will find it one day. But they say in so this is what he says when Herod realized that he'd been outwitted by the Magi, because the Magi didn't go back to him, right? They went. So this is in chapter 2. He was furious, and so he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he learned from the Magi. This was to fulfill what Jeremiah the prophet said, a voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. So this is from Jeremiah 31, who predicts Rachel weeping for her children because they are no more. Rachel is the wife of Jacob, we remember, and is believed to be buried in Ramah. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that Bethlehem is not in Ramah. Ramah and Bethlehem are about, I think it's like 4 miles separated. Like one is north of Jerusalem, one is south of Jerusalem. So they're separated. So it's like, well, how does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, Ramah was the place that Israelite prisoners were assigned to death by Nebuzaradan during the Babylonian captivity. So in other words, Ramah was known as a place of death. It's where the military, whatever his name is,
they would just cast people over there.
When they went to Ramah, that means they had been chosen for execution. So all the writer is doing is making that parallel between the same feeling we felt when we knew someone was going to Ramah and the Babylonian, that they were gone, and we wept over them because they were no more.
Felt.
That's what these women were feeling. So again, like, because people, they will bash on that, like, oh, Ramah isn't near Bethlehem. They really didn't predict anything.
It was an artistic way of saying something.
There's always a reason. And in Jewish literature, it's almost always artistic. And you almost always have to search for it, right? So that happens. And now Christians celebrate the Feast of the Holy Innocents, especially in like the Eastern, Orthodox Church. This is the feast that they commemorate this massacre. So it's been in the Orthodox Church, it's been in the Catholic Church.
When is it?
So it's commemorated on the day of it ultimately got associated with the day of Epiphany. So Epiphany happens on January the 6th. So I didn't realize this too. You know, the 12 days of Christmas, like that's where that comes from. So December 25, January 26, 12 days.
Oh, so it's supposed to be after Christmas?
So we're supposed to have 12 days of Christmas.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
12
crazy.
days of feasting, and that's where the
now you guys know that you can keep your Christmas tree up.
Yeah. All the way into the new year.
Wow.
But yeah, so the Epiphany is when they Christians commemorate the first manifestation of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles, represented by the Magi. That's the main thing with Epiphany. And then there's different iterations, but by the middle 350s, Rome was celebrating the 25th of December as Jesus' birthday. So that's how they got the January 6th date. Is how they moved it back. So I thought that was interesting, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, back to masculinity. Let's put a bow on it. The obviously the masculinity of Herod is in question here.
Yeah.
I mean, he slaughtered these people, but that wife I told you that he really loved, he slaughtered her. Slaughtered her mom. Didn't he kill his kids? He killed his kid. He killed her kids. He lost his marbles. And I realize for us, we're like, yeah, we're all not out there killing people. I get it. But what about the CEO that just got gunned down? They treated his family bad. He didn't believe in the health care that he was getting, and he was kind of an anarchist anyway. And so it's like, well, it's okay if I do this. And then you hear the people going, yeah, if health insurance paid more, this wouldn't happen. Like almost justifying a murder in cold blood.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and that's the thing is like, and that's why Jesus says that it starts at your heart.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't start at your heart, it can't grow into that.
Yeah.
And so for people to have hatred towards somebody, even somebody that does you wrong, like Jesus equates that to murder for a reason.
Yeah. But I think for us, like looking at what could be possible if we're not careful, and I especially think about people who are aging. You know, a lot of people who age, it's really easy to get set in your ways. I feel it. And I've felt it more in the last several years than I ever did before. You know, I'm in my mid-40s, where you've done life enough. It's almost like you finally made it all the way around the block. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go around twice.
Yeah.
But I made it around once, and so I know what's on that corner and that corner and that corner.
Yeah.
And now that I'm back at the corner I started on, I've got such a much better base about where I've been. And so when you're like, okay, you who've only been to that corner, you're presenting me. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't get to that corner
Yeah.
yet. You're probably going to change once you get around here. So then when you do that second lap around life, you're around the block. It's just, I can see how it'd be really easy to just go, yeah, seen that. been there, done that.
Yeah.
You're not going to change me. This is who I am. And part of that, I think, is good because it's conviction. You've learned a few things. You've made a line in the sand, right? But a lot of it is more like, I think, personality driven, or what you personally, your personal likes and dislikes.
Or what's your why?
And that's not biblical. Like when you start like giving up on people or refusing to hear people out or whatever, Herod went insane. Okay, I'm not saying that way.
Yeah.
So to draw the parallels is a stretch, but I do think there's something to, as men, making sure that we
never allow ourselves to become that.
Yeah, you like always looking in the mirror and saying, okay, who am I? Am I really the man God wants me to be? What is he challenging me to? What is the next step in my relationship with him? And maybe it's rest. Maybe it's, I just want you to disciple your grandkids, I just whatever it is. But I just think the older we get, we could turn into Herod very easily, where we get set in our ways. People get mad when they're old, like angry. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I've seen angry old people.
And you're just like, why?
Why are you so angry? But they're angry because it's like, I put up with all this for so many years, and I like, why are you doing it that way? There's a better way to do it. You just get stuck in your ways. And I think I know for you as a young strapping buck that this doesn't apply, but for the older guys,
but that's the thing is how, I mean, you remember when you were young, like young, like you were stubborn then, like it's the human condition
to be stubborn,
but people are less likely to try to change your mind when you're older, so then you really go downhill,
Yeah, that's right.
But when you see, and maybe tying it on this is like, what you see with Herod and what you see with Joseph is two different things. You see Herod has a group of people affirming that this is the Messiah coming, and yet he's dead set on what he wants, not what God wants.
Yeah.
And very, very likely is being told like this is God's will.
Yeah.
Right? But he's so dead set on what he wants that he will go to whatever degree he needs to, even to the point of murdering innocent children.
It's a threat of
children, period, right? Like,
well, it's the threat of his personal kingdom.
Yeah.
And personal autonomy.
Exactly.
And I think about like that in our culture, the autonomy.
That's all we care about.
Autonomy is like, that's the personal autonomy is the greatest thing. Like it's higher than anything else. And if you violate my personal sovereignty or autonomy, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But isn't that what God asks us to do?
Well, that's literally what God does with Joseph. So then you have Joseph who, like, God, you're interrupting my story. Like, I doubt that he wasn't a planned man. Yeah. Because you have to be a planned man to work in the ways that he did.
Yeah. I had something else for my life, and
God interrupted.
in
But he doesn't now take the interruption and say, when the angel explains it to him, like, hey, no, this is the Messiah. Yeah. He doesn't go, well, no, that's not all right, or that's not possible. It's all right, sounds good. Yeah. Like, I submit to that. Yeah. And so you have two different versions of what submission or not submission goes, or pride versus humility. And so for us men, that's what we have to understand is like, there's a level of taking responsibility for what kingdom God has given you, right? The kingdom of your house, the kingdom of your work, that it would all honor God. But then to do with it, you always must seek, all right, in this season of life, am I doing what God wants me to do? Yeah.
Man, this has been fun looking at the Nativity, seeing a little bit. Man, we could do so much more on this as I'm thinking about it. So it's kind of exciting to think about.
I'm just going to do it all year next year.
Year 2025, the year of the Nativity. We won't do that to you guys, but man, it's been a good year. You've added several to your family, which has been exciting, and Man Up has seen a lot of growth. Obviously,
goodness. The Man Up family is huge.
Yeah. So 2024 has been a good year, but it's all good because of this baby who was born, and thank God that the toxic masculinity of Herod the Great, who's not so great,
was overcome.
Yeah, it was overcome. And like your song said, I forget the lyric, but it was something to that effect of, what did he say at the end? It was like middle of the second.
In the middle or at the end?
Well, the end is really good. Do you remember the end? What's the very end say?
So rewind back to the beginning. God made man. Man started sinning. God became man, lived sinless, man killed God, God killed death, it is finished, and because of this story, we're forgiven. So hopefully we could just tie it up on that.
Man, I don't think anything else needs to be said.
I butchered my own song. All right, y'all. Thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.
No, we'll see you next year.
Is this?
No, we still won't see you next year.
Yeah. We got one more.
We'll see you soon. He's gonna cut it anyway.
All right.
That's the last question.